The sound of thunder. Ambassador Marco Reeves stood at the viewport of the Galactic Alliance flagship Harmonious Accord, watching the stars streak by as they traveled through hyperspace. As the only human representative aboard the massive vessel, he'd grown accustomed to the curious stares and hushed conversations that followed him through the corridors. Humans were still newcomers to the Galactic Alliance, having joined only 15 standard cycles ago, but they had quickly earned a reputation for being unpredictable problem solvers. Ambassador Reeves chirped Trill Zax, the Cephalian diplomatic attaché, whose 6 tentacles were currently manipulating a series of holographic displays. We will be arriving at the neutral meeting point in approximately 40 Earth minutes. High Commander Velneri requests your presence in the strategy chamber. Marco nodded, adjusting the small duffel bag that hung from his shoulder, a bag that had raised numerous questions from security, but which he had been adamant about bringing along. I'll be right there, Trill Zax. And please, for the 100th time, just call me Marco. The Cephalian's chromatophores flashed a pattern of embarrassment. Of course, Marco. It's just that in Cephalian culture, titles err. I know. Marco smiled. But we're about to face the Vexari. I think formality is the least of our concerns. The mention of the Vexari caused Trill Zax's skin to pale. The Vexari were a relatively new species to make contact with the Alliance, reptilian, aggressive, and expansionist. Their swift military advances had already consumed 3 non-aligned systems at the edge of Alliance space. This diplomatic mission was likely the last chance to prevent a full-scale war. In the strategy chamber, High Commander Velneri, a towering Alteran with iridescent scales and 4 arms, was briefing the diplomatic team. The 3-dimensional map of the meeting location, an abandoned mining station in a star system that had burned out millennia ago, rotated slowly above the central table. The Vexari have agreed to bring only 1 battle cruiser, Velneri was saying as Marco entered. We will do the same. The meeting will take place in the central hub of the station. Ambassador Reeves, as our specialist in dealing with aggressive species, you will lead the dialogue. Marco approached the table, studying the holographic representation of the station. Have we scanned for traps or hidden forces? Our preliminary scans show nothing, replied Velneri, but the Vexari are known for their signal jamming technology. We can't be certain until we're there. And what about the backup plan if negotiations fail? Marco asked. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Finally, Velneri spoke. If negotiations fail, we have little recourse. Our ship is primarily diplomatic. The Vexari battle cruiser could destroy us before we reached hyperspace. Marco nodded slowly. Then we'd better make sure negotiations don't fail. The abandoned mining station loomed before them, a skeletal structure silhouetted against the dim red light of a distant star. As their shuttle approached, Marco could see the Vexari vessel already docked on the opposite side, larger than the agreed-upon size, which didn't bode well for the negotiations. They violated the terms already, muttered Trill Zax. Perhaps we should return to the Harmonious Accord. No, Marco said firmly. That's exactly what they want. They're testing us, seeing if we'll back down at the first provocation. We proceed as planned. The Alliance shuttle docked with a metallic clunk, and the diplomatic team, consisting of Marco, Trill Zax, Velneri, and 2 Alteran security officers, disembarked. The interior of the station was cold, the life support systems operating at minimal capacity. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air as they made their way toward the central hub. I'm detecting multiple life forms ahead, whispered one of the security officers, checking the small scanner, more than the agreed-upon 5. Stay alert, Marco instructed, but show no signs of alarm or aggression. The central hub was a large circular chamber with multiple entrances. The Vexari delegation was already waiting when they arrived, 8 of them, not the 5 that had been agreed upon. Their leader, General Sekvoth, stood in the center, his reptilian features set in what Marco recognized as a smug expression. You arrived late, hissed Sekvoth, his forked tongue flicking between razor-sharp teeth. "Perhaps the Alliance lacks proper chronometers." "We arrive exactly at the agreed-upon time, General," Marco replied smoothly, stepping forward. "Though I see you've brought additional colleagues. Were your communication systems malfunctioning when we specified 5 representatives each?" Sekvoth's eyes narrowed. "My guards are necessary. This station is unpredictable." "Of course," Marco nodded, setting his duffel bag on the floor beside him. "Let's proceed with the negotiations. The Alliance proposes a demilitarized zone along the borders of the Vexari expansion. 3 light years of neutral space, monitored by automated beacons from both sides." "Unacceptable," Sekvoth snapped. "The systems we have claimed are rightfully Vexari territory. We will not halt our natural expansion because the Alliance fears strength." The negotiations continued for hours, going nowhere. The Vexari made unreasonable demands, then feigned offense when they were rejected. It soon became clear to Marco that they had no intention of reaching a peaceful resolution. This meeting was merely a formality before they launched a full invasion of Alliance space. During a brief recess, Marco pulled Velneri aside. "They're stalling," he whispered, "and I've noticed their guards positioning themselves to block our route back to the shuttle." Velneri's 4 hands twitched nervously. "I've noticed as well. I believe they intend to capture or eliminate us, then claim we attacked them first." "I might have a solution," Marco said, glancing at his duffel bag. "But I need you to trust me and follow my lead when the time comes." When negotiations resumed, the Vexari had dropped all pretense of diplomacy. Sekvoth's demeanor had grown openly hostile. "The Alliance's time of dominance is ending," he declared. "The Vexari will not be contained. We demand immediate surrender of the Proxima and Toth Ceti systems as a show of your commitment to peace. Those are founding systems of the Alliance." Velneri objected. "Home to billions of citizens, your demands are clearly designed to be rejected." "Then reject them," Sekvoth hissed, a cruel smile spreading across his face, "and face the consequences." At that moment, the Vexari guards drew their weapons, small, silent plasma disruptors designed to incapacitate rather than kill. They wanted prisoners, not martyrs. "Wait," Marco called out, stepping forward with his hands raised. "Before you make a grave mistake, General Sekvoth, there's something you should know about humans." The Vexari leader paused, curious despite himself. "Speak quickly, human." "Your intelligence on Earth is incomplete," Marco said calmly, reaching slowly for his duffel bag. "You know we're from a high-gravity world, that we have endurance and strength unusual for our size. But you don't know about our history, our cultural practices." "Cultural practices are irrelevant in war," Sekvoth dismissed. "Not ours," Marco replied, unzipping the bag. "You see, humans have always been tool users. From our earliest days, we've created extensions of ourselves. Some for building, some for hunting, and some for war." With a fluid motion, Marco withdrew a coiled leather bullwhip from the bag. The Vexari guards looked at it with confusion. It was clearly not an energy weapon or any technology they recognized. "This," Marco continued, letting the whip uncoil to the floor, "is called a bullwhip, an ancient human tool used for controlling large animals and for combat." Sekvoth let out a barking laugh. "You threaten Vexari warriors with a strip of animal hide. Your species is more primitive than we thought." "Not threatening," Marco said with a smile. "Demonstrating." With a practiced flick of his wrist, Marco sent the whip cracking through the air with a thunderous boom that echoed throughout the metal chamber. The sound was so sudden and violent that several of the Vexari guards instinctively ducked, their sensitive hearing overwhelmed by the acoustic shock wave. Before they could recover, Marco's whip had already flashed out again, wrapping around a guard's weapon and yanking it from his grasp. A third crack, and the lights above one section of the room shattered, plunging that area into darkness. "What sorcery is this?" Sekvoth demanded, his composure finally breaking. "Physics," Marco replied calmly. The tip of this whip moves faster than the speed of sound. It creates a small sonic boom, a shock wave powerful enough to damage sensitive equipment or disorient certain species with acute hearing, like the Vexari. As if to demonstrate his point, Marco cracked the whip again, sending another thunderous report echoing through the chamber. This time, several of the Vexari visibly winced, their inner eyelids closing reflexively to protect against the perceived threat. "Now, General," Marco continued, the whip held ready at his side, "we can continue this conversation civilly, or I can demonstrate further aspects of humanity's primitive cultural heritage. Your choice." For a long moment, Shekvoth stared at the human ambassador, calculation evident in his reptilian eyes. Then, slowly, he gestured for his. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we should reconsider some aspects of our proposal." Ripples across the stars. Word of the incident at the abandoned mining station spread rapidly throughout the Galactic Alliance. What had begun as a serious diplomatic crisis had transformed into something unexpected, a growing fascination with human primitive technology. 2 standard months after the confrontation with the Vexari, Marco found himself aboard the Alliance military training vessel Swift Justice, demonstrating the use of the Bullwhip to a group of wide-eyed alien officers. "The key is in the wrist motion," he explained, executing a perfect crack that sent the tip of the whip breaking the sound barrier. "It's not about strength, but technique." Commander Grelvox, a stocky Denovian with chitinous armor plates covering most of his body, shook his head in amazement. And this was common knowledge on Earth. Every human knows how to create localized sonic disturbances with primitive materials. Marco chuckled. Hardly. This was a specialized skill even in its heyday, used mostly by livestock handlers and performers. "My grandfather taught me. He was what we called a historical preservationist, keeping old skills alive. Yet it proved more effective against Vexari sensory systems than our advanced sonic disruptors," mused tactical officers in Ra, her feathered crest rising in excitement. "Their technology is designed to filter and counter our standardized frequencies, but the chaotic, organic nature of your Bullwhip bypassed those defenses entirely." This was the reaction Marco had encountered across the Alliance. What humans considered historical curiosities or cultural artifacts, the advanced species of the galaxy saw as unpredictable variables in their carefully calculated equations of warfare and diplomacy. After the demonstration, Admiral Pelthorian, the massive, slug-like commander of the Alliance's Third Fleet, invited Marco to his private quarters. The room was humid and dimly lit, comfortable conditions for the gastropodian, with holographic displays showing real-time updates from across Alliance space. "The Vexari have been quiet since your encounter, Ambassador," Pelthorian said, his voice a rumbling bass that seemed to vibrate the air. "But our intelligence suggests they are regrouping, adapting. They were embarrassed by your display, and that is dangerous. They will seek to restore their honor." Marco nodded, studying the tactical displays. "They're a prideful species. They won't let this go easily. Which is why I've invited you here," the Admiral continued. "The Alliance Defense Council has approved a new initiative, the Human Tactical Innovation Division. We want you to lead it." Marco raised an eyebrow. "Me? I'm a diplomat, not a military strategist." "Perhaps by Alliance standards," Pelthorian countered. "But what you demonstrated with the Vexari was precisely what we need. Unpredictable approaches that our enemies cannot anticipate or counter. For millennia, warfare in the galaxy has been a chess match of predictable moves and countermoves. Each species develops technology along similar paths, based on the same fundamental scientific principles." The Admiral's massive body shifted as he moved closer to Marco. "But humans take different paths. You develop technologies that other species deemed impractical or obsolete. You preserved ancient skills alongside quantum computing. Your species embraces contradiction in ways that confound our allies and enemies alike." Marco considered the offer. His diplomatic mission had effectively ended after the Vexari incident. He had maintained peace, but at the cost of traditional diplomatic protocols. Perhaps this was where he could truly make a difference. "I'll need a team," he said finally. "Other humans with specialized skills and access to Earth's historical archives." Pelforian's mouth parts twisted into what Marco recognized as a smile. "Already arranged. Your new division will be headquartered on the Alliance defense platform Sentinel Prime. You'll have everything you need." 3 standard months later, the Human Tactical Innovation Division had grown from a theoretical concept to a functioning reality. Marco had assembled a team of 20 humans, each with expertise in what the Alliance termed historical combat methodologies. Everything from archery to hand-to-hand combat styles, from blacksmithing to wildfire firefighting techniques. 3 standard months later, the Human Tactical Innovation Division had grown from a theoretical concept to a functioning reality. Marco had assembled a team of 20 humans, each with expertise in what the Alliance termed historical combat methodologies. Everything from archery to hand-to-hand combat styles, from blacksmithing to wildfire firefighting techniques. The Alliance scientists and military strategists had initially been skeptical, but as each human demonstrated their specialty and explained its potential applications in modern warfare, attitudes had shifted from doubt to fascination. Sophia Chen, a champion archer, showed how simple arrow designs could penetrate energy shields calibrated to stop high-velocity projectiles. Derek Okonkwo, a former firefighter, demonstrated techniques for combating plasma fires that proved 30% more effective than standard Alliance protocols. And Maria Gonzalez, an expert in ancient Roman military tactics, adapted legion formations to create new defensive patterns for starship fleets. But the true test of their work came sooner than expected. While conducting an experimental drill at the edge of Alliance space, their sensors detected a massive hyperspace disturbance. Multiple vessels emerging from hyperspace, reported the Cephalian sensor operator, her tentacles working frantically across the control panel. Configuration matches Vexari battle cruisers. Count is 17 vessels. "The Vexari fleet," murmured Admiral Pelforian, who had come to observe the exercises. "They've committed nearly their entire naval force." The main view screen displayed the emerging Vexari armada. Sleek, predatory vessels arrayed in a classic attack formation. At the center was a massive dreadnought, nearly twice the size of anything the intelligence division had reported the Vexari possessing. "They've been building," Marco observed grimly. "This isn't just a retaliatory strike. This is a full invasion force." The communications officer's console chimed. "Incoming transmission from the Vexari flagship." "On screen," ordered Admiral Pelforian. The image of General Sekvoth appeared, his scales gleaming with ceremonial oil, his eyes cold and reptilian. "Alliance vessel," he hissed, "you have the honor of being the first to witness the might of the new Vexari dominion. Surrender, and you may serve as slaves. Resist and be destroyed." Before Admiral Pelforian could respond, Marco stepped forward. "General Sekvoth, we meet again." The Vexari general's eyes narrowed as he recognized the human. The primitive with his leather strap. "Your tricks will not save you this time, human. We have studied your species. We have adapted." "Have you?" Marco replied evenly. "Then you should know the first rule of dealing with humans. We never bring the same trick twice." He gestured to cut the transmission, then turned to Admiral Pelforian. "We need to buy time for reinforcements to arrive. The Sentinel Prime alone can't stand against that fleet." "The nearest Alliance battle group is 3 hours away at maximum hyperspace velocity," the Admiral replied grimly. "We will not last 3 minutes against that armada." Marco smiled. "Then it's a good thing we've been preparing for exactly this scenario." He activated his comm unit. "All HEID personnel, execute Operation Thunderclap." This is not a drill. Across the Sentinel Prime, the human specialists sprang into action. In the main hangar bay, Sophia Chen and her team loaded specially designed arrow-like projectiles into modified deployment tubes. In engineering, Direct Okonkwo's firefighting specialists repurposed the station's atmospheric regulators, and in the tactical center, Maria Gonzalez coordinated the movement of the station's defensive drones into formations that would have been familiar to ancient Roman centurions. "What are they doing?" Admiral Pelthorian asked, watching the flurry of activity on multiple monitors. "Improvising," Marco replied. "It's what humans do best." As the Vexeri fleet moved into attack position, Marco opened a channel to all stations. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy them. Just disrupt their attack long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Focus on sensory warfare. The Vexeri rely heavily on infrared vision and vibration detection. Use that against them." The Vexeri opened fire first, a barrage of plasma torpedoes streaking toward the Sentinel Prime. The station's shields flare under the impact, holding but significantly weakened. "Return fire," ordered Admiral Pelthorian. But instead of conventional energy weapons, the Sentinel Prime deployed Sophia Chen's modified projectiles, hundreds of simple, arrow-like devices that carried no explosive charge or energy signature. The Vexeri ships, expecting energy attacks, had their shields calibrated accordingly. The low-tech projectiles passed through as if the shields weren't there, embedding themselves in the hulls of multiple vessels. "Phase 2, Marco commanded. Derek Okonkwo activated the system he had devised, essentially a massive version of a firefighter's thermal imaging disruptor. Clouds of specialized particles billowed from the Sentinel Prime, enveloping the nearest Vexeri ships. To the Vexeri's infrared vision, it was like being caught in a blinding snowstorm. Simultaneously, the projectiles embedded in the Vexeri hulls activated, transmitting vibrations at precisely the frequencies most disturbing to Vexeri nervous systems, an application of the same principle as Marco's Bullwhip, but refined and targeted. On the view screen, they could see confusion spreading through the Vexeri fleet. Ships began to break formation, their coordinated attack dissolving into chaos. They can't see properly, and their crews are experiencing severe disorientation. Marco explained, "It won't last long. They'll adapt. But it doesn't need to." For the next 2 hours, the Sentinel Prime executed a defensive strategy unlike anything the Alliance had employed before. Maria Gonzalez's drone formations created the illusion of multiple defensive platforms. Sophia's team deployed increasingly creative variants of their projectiles, each designed to exploit different weaknesses in Vexeri technology or biology. And throughout it all, they maintained an irregular pattern of movement and response that prevented the Vexeri from predicting their next action. When the Alliance reinforcements finally arrived, a battle group of 30 vessels emerging from hyperspace behind the Vexeri fleet, General Tsekloff found his forces scattered, disoriented, and vulnerable. The battle that followed was brief. Caught between the fresh Alliance forces and the still-fighting Sentinel Prime, the Vexeri fleet had no choice but to retreat. More than half their vessels had suffered no actual structural damage, yet they had been rendered combat ineffective by what the Vexeri military would later term human sensory warfare. In the aftermath, as Alliance technicians began repairs on the Sentinel Prime, Admiral Pelthorian found Marco in the tactical center, reviewing data from the engagement. "The Alliance Defense Council will want a full report," the Admiral said, his massive body seeming somehow less imposing than before. "They will not believe that we held off a Vexeri armada using what amounts to arrows, smoke, and vibrations." Marco smiled tiredly. "Tell them it's just the beginning. Humans have thousands of years of history finding unconventional solutions to seemingly impossible problems. We've barely scratched the surface of what we can adapt from our past to serve the Alliance's future." The Admiral's eye stalks swiveled to focus intently on the human. "The Vexeri will return with new countermeasures." "Of course they will," Marco nodded. "And we'll have new surprises waiting. That's the thing about humans. We never run out of weird ideas." As if to emphasize his point, Marco reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, seemingly innocuous object, a simple coin. "Do you know what this is?" he asked the Admiral. Earth currency, Pelthorian guessed. No, it's actually a simple human magic trick, Marco replied, making the coin seemingly vanish between his fingers, then reappear behind the Admiral's eye stalk. Misdirection and sleight of hand. Harmless entertainment on Earth, but imagine the applications in space warfare. Drone decoys that convince enemy targeting systems they're tracking capital ships, or shield modulators that appear to fail in one section, while actually strengthening there. The Admiral watched, fascinated, as Marco manipulated the coin through increasingly complex maneuvers. From children's entertainment to military strategy, Pelthorian mused. Perhaps that is what makes humans truly unique in the galaxy. You see connections where others see only separation. We're adaptable, Marco shrugged. We take what works and repurpose it, regardless of its original intent. It's not always elegant, but it's effective. As the Alliance battle group secured the area and began escorting the Sentinel Prime back to safer territory, news of the unconventional defense spread throughout Alliance space. The Human Tactical Innovation Division, once viewed as a curious diplomatic gesture, was suddenly the most discussed military unit in the galaxy. And somewhere, in the retreating Vexari fleet, General Sekloth stared at the reports from his damaged flagship with a mixture of rage and grudging respect. The humans had outwitted him again, using technologies so simple they barely qualified as technologies at all. His scientists had prepared for energy weapons, advanced shield harmonics, even potential telepathic attacks, but not for smoke and arrows and vibrating pieces of metal. Next time, he hissed to his empty command chamber, next time we will be ready for your primitive tricks, humans. But even as he made the promise, a part of him wondered if there would ever be a next time. Because if there was one lesson the Vexari had learned about humans, it was this: they never used the same trick twice.